Welcome to NFL World, where the NFL starts and ends. I'm your host, Jacob, and welcome to the NFL Dream. This is the 7th episode of this series. And now we got the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have waited a very long time to return to Super Bowl glory. It's been 15 years that they've waited for this. Now, they've made some good signings. They've made some trades that were like, okay, that was a good one. They also made a trade that was like, I'm skeptical because they didn't do anything. So let's recap what they did this offseason. They signed Darius Slay, which I like the move that they did. 1 year, $10 million, completely guaranteed. It was also one of those moves of, okay, it happened, but then yet we didn't have the actual signing. It was weird how long it took. Malik Harrison, the linebacker, 2 years, $10 million, was from the Ravens. Made 2 years. 2 years, $8 million. Juan Thornhill from the Browns, 1 year deal, contracts are unknown. Brandon Incoles, 2 year contract, details are unknown. Kenneth Gainwell from the Eagles, 1 year contract, $1.79 million. Don tight end played with the Chargers around a little bit, 1 year deal, $1.17 million. The trades were obviously very known. DK Metcalf, and they also got Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith. We told you about the DK Metcalf one the day after it happened. Metcalf, the trade was actually, they sent a 2025 second round pick and a 6th round pick and swapped 7th round picks in 2025 and got Metcalf. That's how it happened. And then they gave him a big extension. The Jalen Ramsey, Jonnu Smith trade we talked about here on this channel as well. The Steelers sent Minkah Fitzpatrick along with a 2027 7th round pick for Jalen Ramsey, Jonnu Smith, and a 2027 7th round pick. The other signings, or other notable moves, I should say, they re-signed both Ben Skoranek and Scotty Miller, released Larry Ogunjobi, which we said yesterday, restructured Cole Holcomb's contract, signed Daniel Ekwale, and I believe it's Letitius Smith, but I'm not 100% sure about that one. He's a guard. Ekwale is a defensive tackle. They also second round tendered Jalen Warren, which the second round tenders, it's a little confusing how these tenders works out. If you're a restricted free agent, which Warren is, you have a first round tender, a second round tender, a right to first refusal tender, or just, I believe there's also just a restricted tender, and that's it. They got him a second round tender offer, which is less. It's less money, but then you can try to extend him to give him more. It's very complicated. But that's exactly what they did for Jalen Warren. Of the draft picks, and we'll go into why I think, it was a little interesting the way they operated. Because we got to understand, they didn't sign Aaron Rodgers until after the draft and after all this craziness went down. So they drafted Derek Harmon in the first round, which is a very Pittsburgh Steelers move. Draft a defensive tackle, draft an offensive lineman in the first round. That's kind of what they do. Round 3, they drafted Caleb Johnson, the running back from Iowa. I like the move. I thought it was a good move. This is your Najee Harris replacement. Big guy, and you get him out in space, and he's really hard to bring down. Jack Sawyer, the edge out of Ohio State, I like him. They drafted him in the 4th round. I like him a lot. A little banged up, but when he's on the field, he plays very well. Yaya Black, they drafted the defensive tackle from Iowa, Yaya Black, in the 5th round. They went heavy at defensive tackle, which I thought was interesting. But when you have a guy who's named Yaya, I'll take that any day of the week. Let's go. Will Howard in the 6th round from Ohio State. I was surprised by the length of time it took them to draft a quarterback. I thought they were going to draft a quarterback early. I thought they were going to go wide receiver, running back, and quarterback really early. And they went running back early. They just didn't do the other things as early, or didn't do it at all. Carson, I think it's Browner, the linebacker from Washington. That was a 7th round pick. Also in the 7th round, Dante Kent, the cornerback from Central Michigan. Which, okay, it's a 7th round pick. I can't really be mad at those picks. They're a 7th round that darts up the wall almost. Now, the biggest loss of the free agency, and still I don't understand why they did it, was George Pickens. I know it happened after the draft. I know it's not considered part of free agency. But the George Pickens move was puzzling. I guess the best way I could put it, puzzling. Because you bring in DK Metcalf to hopefully take the pressure off George Pickens. You bring in Aaron Rodgers, which to help George Pickens actually have a quarterback who can throw him the football, not like Russell Wilson, who could only throw these passes that were, I call them moon balls. They were basically just shooting him up in the air and hope he comes down with it. And Aaron can absolutely do that, but you also know he's a very precision-based guy, and he'll get the ball to you no matter where you are on the field. And you think that's going to help out George Pickens, that's going to help out DK Metcalf. So you can understand why I was puzzled to the point of, why would they trade George Pickens? It just didn't make any sense to me. In the haul they got a 3rd round pick and a 5th round pick for it. Like, in the way I interpreted this was, it felt like they didn't want to deal with him anymore. But then why would you bring in a player like DK Metcalf, who basically does the same thing that George Pickens does? I just don't understand. DK Metcalf is a big guy, but he doesn't play to his size sometimes. He plays more like a smaller receiver. And the thing with Pickens is he plays bigger. He plays like, I'm going to go above the rim and make a play. I'm going to throw it anyways in my vicinity. I'm going to make a play. That's how he plays. So I thought, okay, those things would work very well together. And then bringing in Aaron Rodgers, that would work very well with him. And yet, somehow, the decision was made to move on from George Pickens and get very little in return. And the reason I say that is because you didn't draft any wide receiver, so I don't even think you knew if this was going to in fact happen. You didn't sign anyone in the aftermath of it. You didn't sign anyone before it. In fact, the people you have lost, you lost Russell Wilson. He went to the Giants, which you weren't going to keep him anyway. You lost Justin Fields. He went to the Jets. Najee Harris signed with the Chargers. James Daniels signed with the Dolphins. Dan Moore signs with the Titans. Dante Jackson signs with the Chargers. Landon Roberts signed with the Raiders. And like we said, we just mentioned the George Pickens stuff. There's a lot going on here. Now, this is a team that went 10-7 last year, and that was kind of a shocking record. They won 58% of their games, basically, .588. And they were 5-3 at home. They were 5-4 on the road. Okay, you're above 500 on the road, and you're 2 games over 500 at home. But you lost 4 in a row after nearly almost winning your division. Remember, we were thinking this team was going to win their division in November. And next thing you know, we look up and we're like, oh, not only did they lose the meeting against the Ravens, they couldn't win any other game. So that was concerning. And looking at their schedule, it's not a particularly hard one. I don't know if their offense can handle it. I mean, look at it. Their first game is they're at the Jets, they're home for Seattle, they're at New England, and they technically have a home game against the Vikings, but they're not in Pittsburgh. They're across the pond. Then they have an early bye week, week 5. Then they're back, home for Cleveland, at Cincinnati, home for Green Bay, home for Indianapolis, home for at the Chargers, home for Cincinnati, at Chicago, home for Buffalo, at Baltimore, home for Miami, at Detroit, at Cleveland, home for Baltimore. With that schedule, and yeah, I know, okay, at Baltimore is tough. Anytime you gotta play Buffalo anywhere, it's going to be tough. You're home for Miami, which Miami doesn't play great in December. You're good there. Then you got a short week before you go on the road to at Detroit, because that game against the Dolphins is a Monday. The following Sunday, you're at Detroit, and you're at Cleveland on the 28th of December. And then you're home for Baltimore. So what's my record for the Pittsburgh Steelers? The Steelers' record this year in 2025 will be 10-7. That's their record, 10-7. Because I don't know, the last time we saw their defense, they were not good. They couldn't stop Derrick Henry, nor did they try. And last season when we watched Aaron Rodgers play, he didn't look like Aaron Rodgers. He didn't look good. He didn't do anything. He didn't even look serviceable at times. It was just one after another with Rodgers, and he was blaming everybody else but himself, which he does a lot. This Steelers defense wasn't good. The Steelers offense wasn't that good. And then you trade your best player that you have in George Pickens for very little, but you trade for DK Metcalf. So I didn't understand why they made that choice and then not draft a wide receiver if you were thinking we might move on from George Pickens. And if we're not, we are going to go and get a good third wide receiver for this team. And they didn't do that either. So there was a lot of things that happened that I can't completely understand. So 10-7 is this team. My biggest concern for them, as concerning as the defense was at the end, it looked like they quit. My concern is the offense. They haven't been able to run the ball particularly well. They run it at a great volume. They just don't get a lot of success from it. They just run it a lot. They just don't have a lot of success. Besides those deep balls that they can throw, that offense was not very good last year, so I'm a little concerned about that. There's concerns. There's concerning levels. And I think I don't completely blame Tomlin for this. I do blame him for the fact of who he hires to do it, because in my opinion, that's the one thing Tomlin has not been good at. For the length of him being the head coach, is he's never hired the right assistants. The Arthur Smith one, I was like, okay, I guess. I don't see him as the top coach. I didn't see him that way when he was the offensive coordinator in Tennessee. I didn't see him when he was that way in Atlanta. So why you thought that was a good choice does not benefit. You bring in Aaron Rodgers, who's now adding his spin to the offense, not just you have to mesh those things together, which will take time. So I don't think their record changes from last year. I think they are 10-7, and they're going to live in that section and try to battle it out with Cincinnati when it comes to playoffs. But let me know what you guys think. Do you think the Pittsburgh Steelers will have a better record than they did? Than they did? Take advantage of it, as August 10th is the end of this challenge. Let's get to 500 subs before August 10th. For NFL World, I'm Jacob Hubert. Out.